As we're working on the background to get us started, we already have our wash, which is a really light blue to get a little bit of color on the page. The next thing that we're going to be doing is working in this background area to start to develop some of the details, specifically in the trees. In that background, I see a blue-green, I see a really light blue, and I see a very, very watered down color of blue. Your biggest challenge when doing the background is making sure that your colors are watered down. So I'm not going to have a whole lot of color in my tray here. So you can see a little bit of what I'm doing. I'm gonna water down, I'm putting a lot of water in my tray. I'm just gonna dip my brush and get lots and lots of water so that when I apply some of the paint, that I am not gonna end up with a really, really bright color. Where are those really, really bright colors going? They will go in the foreground. The background is going to be really light, really subtle, and it is not going to stand out too much. What if you make a mistake and you accidentally apply too much? That's easy. Get your paper towel and dab it right away while it's still wet. So I have my paper towel handy. Now I'm ready to apply some colors. You might choose to do a different color scheme. That's okay. My color scheme that I am working with today has cool colors. That's the blues, the greens, and the purples. Right now, the color that I have mixed up in my palette is going to go on fairly subtle. I just grabbed just a little bit of blue. I'm going to add a little bit of variances, meaning I'm adding multiple colors of blue in here. And I'm going to make sure I have lots and lots of water. I might touch on a little bit of green. Give us that little blue-green look. Adding lots of water here. You want a watered down version so that it does not go on too heavy. And now I'm just going to work on these little trees in the background. I am going to keep all of the areas around the trees dry. So I'm just going to lightly touch my tree in the areas where I want to apply paint. Again, I will emphasize the words over and over and over. This is a watered down, subtle application of color. It is not meant to be a deep color. If you paint it really deep, you're giving the illusion that it is close to you. If you give the illusion that it is close to you, then you're not accurately portraying what we see in the image. Now, some of these kind of fade into the distance. And I could always make them a little bit more subtle. Some of these, you can see the bottom, and some of them you cannot. I can always add more pigment, but it's a lot harder to take it away. If you let it dry on your paper, not going to come away very easily. And if you keep all of the areas around what you're working on dry, then look what happens if I want to add just a little bit of color to the area that's wet. I just touch it and look how it spreads. It's going to spread for me like magic. That is the glory of watercolor painting. It's going to do the work for you. Now, what if I am not liking the way it looks? What if it looks like it's too dark? Like maybe this one right here. I think I want to make it more subtle. That's why I got my paper towel. And watch what I do. I'm just going to wad it up and I'm going to tap, 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 tap. And I'm making it more subtle. Okay, see how I was able to make that go away? While it was wet, I took a dry paper towel and I applied it to that area. And that fixed it. Now, if I want to go back later on and I want to add a little bit more color to my background, I can do that, but now's not a good time because I'm trying to keep the trees or the paint in the area of the trees very, very subtle. And I want to control it as much as I can. Right now, I am putting in a very watered down blue for those trees in the background. And I can always go back and add more color, but for right now, I am very satisfied with the colors that I'm getting. It's not meant to be deep dark blue, it's meant to be watered down. I'm going to begin working in this really light area at the very bottom. There were some words that I used to describe this painting last week. They were luminous. I chose to use those words to describe. That is a painting that is, the main thing that you really notice is the light quality in the painting. And so what I am doing is making sure that that area right in the center and down at the bottom still have those really pretty light qualities. That means I have to keep that subtle. I can still apply color, but I'm going to keep it subtle. It has a little bit of a blue tinge, so I have used some of that same blue that I used on my trees. If you want to be able to add a little bit of color, watch what I do. If I want to, at the edges of that entrance into the woods, there's a real light purple. Really, really light, right down here. Watch, I'm just gonna tickle, like barely touch my paint palette with my paintbrush. And now I just touch that area around there. Touch, 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 little tap, 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 tap. And see how it begins to add just a little bit of detail, just a tiny bit. I did not push my brush all the way down into the palette. I just tickled it with the very, very tip. And then I can kind of tap, tap, tap along those edges. And now I'm giving myself a nice subtle color. What if I accidentally put too much? No problem. Dip your brush in some water. And I want you to go ahead and tap, tap, tap. And then do a lift. with your paper towel. Look, I was able to remove the excess paint. Did I like what I had done? Yes. But I want you to know, as an artist, you can easily fix some mistakes that you make. So I'm just going to go back and I'm going to do a tap, 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 tap. And this is just setting the scene for my areas that are going to be really light and bright. Now, if you're really itching to get going with some more color, the next color I'm going to work with is going to be a blue-green along these edges here. So in my palette, I want it to be pretty watered down. So I'm going to apply some green to my paint that I already have going. And I'm going to make sure that I have plenty of water in there so it doesn't go on too dark. If it goes on too dark, we can always try to remove it, but it's really helpful to go on with a really light color. Here is my blue-green. Now, if you see, my paintbrush is definitely applying the paint really small. You might find it easier to go in with a larger brush. I have a couple of larger brushes. Here's one here. This has a bigger brush that's going to put more paint on. I always pull it to a nice little point. Or I have a much bigger brush like this. Wet it, pull it to a nice point, and you can apply the paint in a larger amount with a larger brush. You might enjoy using either or. It doesn't matter. You're the artist. You get to decide. So what I'm doing here is just beginning to get a little bit of that green in there. That green along the edges of my forest winter scene. You could call this a spring scene. I don't know if I should be calling this a winter scene. It does look like there's leaves on that tree. But the colors are so cool that you can't help but think that this must be a winter scene. It can be whatever you want to make it. So what I'm going to be doing is just really subtly adding different colors to different areas. And what I'm trying to do is, again, keep it nice and light so that as I add my darker colors next time, then I'm able to really have a nice variation in color. I can still see my pencil lines. That's important. I still need to be able to see where my trees are. And now I'm just applying subtle colors around the areas that have that really light quality. These are gonna layer and layer with more beautiful color. So this is not it. This is just the base. A wash, if you will. Now, from what you can see, this is really, really light. When I look at my video camera, this looks way lighter than it actually is. And this paper is looking all bumpy. Hence the reason you really want to, as an artist, when you are working with watercolor in the future, you want to invest in some watercolor paper. 140-pound paper is what I like to use. So right now, the paint colors look very subtle in the video, and my paper is looking very wavy or bumpy. While I let my paint dry, I'll just kind of remind you that if your paper is really bumpy or really thin paper like mine, you just want to make sure that you kind of compress your paper in between some books when it's dry, and that'll help kind of shape it back into a nice flat piece.